Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Kumar Danatrayan. I forgot my name there for a second with Agile Meridian. And I'm honored and pleased to be here today with my good friend Paula Stewart, who I've known now we were just talking about that a second ago. How long have we known each other, Paula? I'd say it's about 2 or 3 years, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, we were both working, sort of volunteering our time on an engagement. We met through the Xscale coaching community, and ever since we've become good friends and collaborators and colleagues in a number of things. Paula, would you like to say a few things about yourself?
Yeah, I've been an Agile coach at the program level and enterprise level, product owner, and I've worn almost every hat you can think of in software engineering over a couple of decades. But I'm really excited to work with Kumar. He is a wonderful facilitator and coach, and I know that I'm learning something every day and delivering really good value, excellent value to the participants in our training and in our webinars.
Thank you so much, Paula. And I feel the same way. I learn something new every time I work with you and others in our small coaching community. So as to the topic of today's webinar, we're going to be talking about how to change your meeting culture. And this is a topic I think that's near and dear to everyone's heart, especially in light of the events over the past couple of years. People having to work from home, and all that has brought about with it, right? So we can't just go down the hall and have a quick conversation. Everything's now a meeting. So how do you change that? And so, just real quick, are you going to share, Paula?
Yeah, go ahead and let me set this up.
I'm just going to say a few words in the beginning here, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Paula.
Okay.
And if you want me to share, I'm happy to do that too.
I am sharing.
So while we're waiting for the presentation to come up, if you would all just put in a something in the chat, in the YouTube chat. We're going to be using both YouTube chat and we're using a presentation tool called Mentimeter. And so we'll be using a combination of the two, right? So if you would just in the YouTube chat put in where you're signing in from in the world and what you hope to get out of this webinar. If you could do that, that would be great. So here we go. Transform your meeting culture, right? So that's kind of our topic of the day. And if you could just advance one more slide, that's my last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Paula. And so we're going to be using Mentimeter. That's what this presentation has been put together in. So you can interact with us in this webinar in one of two ways. On your cell phone, you could use, if you have the Menti app, that's great. If not, it's okay. You just open a browser on your cell phone and put in the code that's on the top. And the code is 44145162. I'm just going to put it in the chat as well. 44145162. All right, awesome. Welcome, Elaine, or Elian, I'm sorry, from Amsterdam, all the way from Amsterdam. And we have Lacey from Indiana. That's awesome. Welcome. We hope we have more joining us here soon. So Mentimeter, you go there, you put in that code in there on your cell phone or your browser window, and that's really it. So again, we're going to be interacting with you one of two ways. If you have questions, put it in the YouTube chat and interacting with the presentation through Mentimeter. Okay, it is all yours, Paula.
Okay. So I wanted to start with the question. When we're creating products and services, we're always looking at customer value, the quality, and time to market, which is all about efficiency. But I'm sure it's occurred to all of you that in organizations, we don't necessarily operate with that same lens, especially when it comes to meetings. And so, like many of you, I have found myself, and so has Kumar, in meetings where we wondered what the purpose was, what the deliverables were, and if even if we had the right people in the room. I'd like to take a moment and ask you, in 3 words, to describe your current meeting culture. If you would take some time to do it, that would be great.
So this is where you'll use Menti. Hopefully you're in the tool. So Mentimeter, you put in, go to a browser, 44145162, and then you will be able to interact with us in through the presentation.
I'm really interested to see what they're going to say. Not really surprising. Many of you have said we have too many meetings, they're not fit for purpose, and they're just boring. They're tense. So there's some amount of emotion there, and people aren't necessarily getting along or communicating well. Got it. Anything else? All right. See, meetings are a flashlight. And if you're going into your organization and talking to leadership, as say a coach, you might want to bring up this point. Meetings tell us a lot about the organization. So, I've walked into organizations where either virtually or in person, there was basically one person talking. In fact, 75%, they're the person that's communicating. And occasionally they might call out, Jim, go ahead and share that latest report with us. Sarah, what did you find in the last experiment that you did? In any case, you can quickly see that maybe this organizational culture is a little bit more about top down command control than anything else. I've also walked into organizations and through transformation have been a coach that has led teams to talk to each other across the hierarchy of an organization, top down, bottom up, getting everyone in the room. Yes, with whiteboards and stickies, so that we hear from every voice in the room, not just the loudest voice in the room. And in these companies, I think, well, they're doing a great job of leveraging their collective intelligence and creativity. Why would we want to put a cork or a bottle on that? Look around. Are your meetings about the values, the visions, the vision, and the goals that you have? Can you actually see a relationship between the meetings that you're going to and the goals or the future vision that your company has set forth? In addition to that, do you hear that there's a lot of alignment when people are in those meetings together? Is the facilitator driving the meeting in such a way that everyone is being heard from, that you know if you have alignment or not? And finally, since we are producing something for a customer, then how many times are we actually meeting with the customers and getting their feedback? How many times do we even bring in data that tell us customer sentiment or the net promoter score? When do we look at customer journeys together or do persona mapping, empathy mapping? See, I've been in organizations and have been surprised how little we either engage directly with the customer or that we talk about the customer in terms of the product we're delivering.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So are you saying we should do customer journey maps for meetings?
I think that is one meeting we absolutely can have.
Oh, you mean a meeting for customer journey mapping? But
Yes.
are you I'm curious if you think that we should use customer journey mapping as a tool to have better meetings.
Thank you for that idea. That's brilliant. Yes. Why not?
How would
And
that even
what if
work?
we thought
That's
about
interesting.
well, what if we thought about in our transformation or with our employees that they're customers in a sense,
Hmm.
and we traced out the internal customer journey just as we would if we were developing a product for an external customer.
Wow, we would be then probably more concerned with their experience, right, in meetings, and maybe make sure that the meetings are purposeful and have a good outcome. That's an interesting thought there. I don't know if that's what you intended, but wouldn't that be amazing to be able to do something like that?
I think it's a brilliant idea, Kumar. I'm so glad I came up with it. My dad used to say that to me all the time.
Right.
So go ahead and take a few minutes, if you would, going back into menti.com and using the same code, or if you're already there, and rate your meeting culture, your organization's meeting culture.
Yeah, we have a few new folks that joined us, and so if you just joined, what you want to do is obviously you can interact with us through the YouTube chat, but also you want to go to menti.com on your phone. Just open up a browser on your phone or your computer browser and go to menti.com and put that code in, and then you'll be able to interact with this questionnaire, if you will, this assessment. So looking forward to seeing your feedback.
Okay, I'm going to give everyone a minute.
Yeah, this is an interesting questionnaire, Paula. I'm curious as to how people are going to vote on this. I know where I am. I sit. Um, it's. I'm not going to tip my hand, but yeah. There you go. That's interesting.
I see a lot of room for improvement in many areas.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I don't know if everyone has had a chance to vote or not. Um,
the other thing I think is interesting, and I think maybe in the future we can look at these questions a little differently, because if every meeting is valuable use of time, or 50% is a valuable use of time, then are we really focused on a shared vision, or is there true collaboration?
yeah, these are interesting responses. I would have expected them to be lower on the lower scale. That's great. It means that the people that are coming here are doing something different, right? I'd love to hear, and I'm sure you would too, Paula. What is it that you're doing that's different, so that it's more skewed to the strongly agree than the strongly disagree? Just
Yeah,
put that
so
in the
go
chat
ahead.
if you will.
Yeah, go ahead and add that to the chat. We'd love to hear what you're doing right.
Yeah, it is interesting though when you look at the curve of these scores. There's sort of the second question here. We achieve what we need to in meetings. There's like a bump here in the lower end and a couple of people bump here at the higher end. And so it's not consistent. There's almost like two groups, right? That of the we don't have as many people as we would have liked to in this webinar, but for those of you that are here, that's really an interesting poll.
I'm also interested here that meetings aren't designed or assessed, yet it sounds like meetings are an opportunity to co create.
Yeah,
And they do achieve, in general, 50% of the time, what they need to in meetings.
yeah,
And then
that's
choice. I think that the freedom to choose the meetings you're in can be taken a lot of ways. And we'll be talking about that further. Okay. So, Doodle is one of the most popular online scheduling tools. And they did a survey. Their first survey or research was on meetings in 2019. And they've done subsequent reports in 2020 and 2021. And that's where we're getting a lot of our data. So, in their survey, they found out that there is $541 billion spent in what people that were surveyed said were pointless meetings as of 2019. And for all, I'm also curious, Kumar, based on the results that we got, where people are coming from, what roles they're in, what position
Mhm.
they're in organizations.
Yeah,
And
that's a great question. If you just put that in the chat, the folks that are here on this webinar, just what's your role? You know, what role do you play? That would be great for us to know.
I hear this a lot from colleagues, peers, people that I'm coaching, that they're so busy in meetings that they have to multitask, or they have to choose to come in early, work during lunch, work later, in order to get done what they usually call their real work. I hear that a lot. And what I know to be true is that that causes a lack of work life balance. And maybe we need to think about the meetings, and are we burning out the people in our meetings? And then, is this impacting turnover, which we would all agree is extremely expensive? You have to go out and do your candidate profiling. You've got to find your candidate, and then you've got to onboard them. And that could take months before they're working at the same level as your current employees.
Yeah, well, before you move on, I wanted to add a thought that you know, due to the pandemic, I think people um, are the only way to communicate with people is to have another meeting, right? And so the workday just becomes inundated with meetings after meetings after meetings because that's the only way to communicate. And so, you know, I think we're going to explore some strategies on how you can solve for that. One of our attendees is a change manager, and I know another one is an agile coach, and so that may explain the responses we got. That, you know, as a change manager or an agile coach, you're probably trying to get meetings that are more productive and more useful for folks. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, especially our agile coach will understand the term context switching and how expensive that is to being able to work efficiently. So, I'm also hearing from people that I speak to that they're often working on something, their heads down, then they're called into a meeting, they have to put that aside only to come back and try to pick up from where they were. And it's not just the time lost, right, in being in that meeting, it's the change in context and having to refocus again and pick something up and the time it takes to get back on board to what they were doing. Again, this is a bottleneck. This is something that leads to burnout. I see a correlation between a meeting culture that has people in meetings a good portion of the day where they're having to multitask or work extra hours with team dynamics. Let's face it, if you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, worried about the work you have to do either at lunchtime or at night, or you're multitasking, how much time does that really give you? And can you be really present and communicating fully with the people that you're around? I love this quote. Kumar, you referred to this early in the presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because you don't get the water cooler conversations. You don't get to go down the hall to the lunchroom and engage in the real work, right? The gossip, if you will, of the workplace. You know, to learn things about what others are doing and so on. And so you have to schedule a meeting, and so that leads to really a long day.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
as
curious, Paul. Sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
Lacey, one of our attendees, is a change manager. I'd love if you could sort of share in the YouTube chat anything that if this resonates, if you know, or any of you, the attendees, right? Are these resonating, and what are you guys doing about it, right, to sort of help change the culture? And I'd love to hear your feedback. Go ahead, Paula.
So according to Doodle report for 2021, in 2021, virtual meetings increased by over 60%. And for some of us in certain organizations that are working 100% remotely, I'm sure that number is a lot higher.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the types of solutions? And before we go on, Kumar, have you heard back from anyone in the YouTube channel?
No, not yet, but I'm sure they will.
Okay.
And if you're just joining us, I see a few more people joined us. So we're communicating to you via YouTube, of course, via video, but also through YouTube chat and through this presentation. So menti.com, you just type in menti.com on your browser, either on your phone or on your PC or Mac, and put in that code that's on the top of the screen, and you can participate in this poll. So another poll for you to do. And thank you, Lacey. So Lacey tries to create short meetings with focused titles. Love it. Short meetings, focused titles, so people can sort of really get a sense for what that is. They are already grounded in the topic. They can come in with whatever their thoughts are. And you know, they know it's short, right? So it has a purpose to it. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, maybe even a little sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Like pay attention because we only have 20 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, if you could go ahead and assess, I will go ahead and start the countdown.
All right. So, you know, one thing to think about as you're going through this survey is, you know, for all of you, just to assess your current meeting culture, right? So, can you eliminate any meetings? Meaning, can you just not show up, and will you be missed? Right? Can you if you're organizing the meeting, can you really sort of assess who actually needs to be there, and on, right?
Well, if you're a coach, I'm sure some of you have actually been a champion for your team to have heads down time to be able to improve their flow of work. And so you might be going to leadership on behalf of the team and asking if the members really need to be there. Is there any way to communicate the information to them, especially if they're under time pressure?
Right. So please, if you're not in Menti, get in there and answer this little survey. It's helpful for us, of course, but it's also helpful for you to really kind of reflect on where you think you are. And there we go. So we're getting some responses in.
There's Lacey. Yes, we can reduce time in meetings. And yes, we can have better outcomes through preparation.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into some of the ways that you can prepare in advance, which, by the way, is also related to asynchronous communication.
Right.
And we can coach people for better outcomes. I'd love to hear from anyone who said, we can coach people for better outcomes. What does that mean to you? If you would mind putting in your comment in the channel, that would be appreciated. How do you coach people for better outcomes? What does that mean? I think, Kumar, there's pressure on people in organizations to show up more, to be more visible, because we're not all in the workplace, right? So some people, I think, actually think they don't have a choice. They have to show up. They have to be more visible. In fact, Elon Musk, just today, or maybe it's the last week, posted that the higher up you are in the organization, the more visible you need to be.
Yeah.
I would say to an extent, given that the visibility is meaningful and impactful, right?
Right. Yeah, Elon Musk is becoming more and more of a polarizing figure, but he does have the right ideas in a lot of sense, in a lot of contexts, I should say. It's just sometimes it comes across sort of very dogmatic in his views.
Yeah,
But
like more
actually,
black and white.
Tesla works amazingly well in a very agile and nimble fashion. This slide here, I don't know if this was your intent, Paula, but it's so important for people to think about individually, to think about, I need so much time for uninterrupted, focused time for work, and so that they can get their work done, so they're not working on their time off. And so, really, it's that heads down work, right, Paula, that you're
Yeah,
talking about
absolutely.
here.
And time for breaks.
Yeah.
And I think that remote work actually makes that easier
Right.
for some people. And then time for innovation, like scheduling time for innovation, whether that be at the end of a quarter or daily or weekly.
Yeah.
Many organizations don't schedule time for innovation at all.
Yeah. Tracy, welcome, Tracy. I see you're here on this call. And Tracy, her how was lead by example, set a goal for the meeting, and have videos on when remote, right? So that way you get to see people and hear them. Eliane, having meetings prepared up front. So do enough preparation up front so that your meetings go well. Love it. I was listening to a podcast the other day I shared with you, Paula, and I can't remember the name of the podcast, but they were talking about this very topic, and the one of the people said, there's sort of quiet time or focus time, there's collaboration time, which you have in here on the slide, Paula, and then there's like time off, and so those are all equally important to have a good meeting culture.
So, all of you, I imagine many of you are familiar with the 360-degree assessment, which is a brilliant way to get feedback from various people that you interact with in the workplace, or for your employees to get the feedback they need to improve. Well, our idea is, why not apply that 360-degree assessment to our meetings, especially the ones that are most impactful, the ones that cost more, there are more people there, they're reoccurring, they take days or a day or even half a day. And what you could do is simply automate a quick automated survey that after the meeting, people get to answer. Was this a valuable use of your time? Was the outcome achieved that was set forth? Did you know what the purpose of the meeting was? Um, in fact, if you guys want to put in additional questions in the chat, that would be great. We'd love to hear what your questions would be. So many of you are probably familiar with portfolio management. There's various types of portfolio management. IT, information technology, has portfolio management where we look at all of the applications that we support and whether we can rationalize them. In other words, can we simplify the work by eliminating some of them, by combining them? And it's the same thing with meetings. Iteratively, we can have an inventory of our meetings and look at things like, how expensive is this meeting? Based on wages, how much people are making, the time that's spent. Can we eliminate some of these meetings? Like, are we getting the outcomes we expect? Can we perhaps combine the meetings? Or as Lacey said, make those meetings shorter. So obviously with remote work, and even before then, asynchronous communication is incredibly important. I'd like to share a quick story. I was in a organization where we were writing a statement of work. the facilitator had us come into the room and passed out a document. And all of us were supposed to sit there and modify that document. And the first question was, what is SQL? I had been working a lot of hours as a leader in the organization, responsible for deployments. And I left to go get a cup of coffee. I didn't come back. I feel a little bad about that. But at the same time, there are so many ways that we can use asynchronous communication, especially when our teams are busy and we want to make sure that their time is used efficiently. So there are collaboration tools like Google Suite, Office 365. I mean, they've been out there forever. We have version history, we have tracking changes. We can send out pre work, maybe a document. Or I used to have a UX designer come up with a prototype and share that with the entire team before we started talking about the work we were going to do. Videos can be very informative. And if you have an open organizational culture, then you could even record some of the meetings for people that aren't going to be present. And then, of course, there's the instant messaging channels that are brilliant for ad hoc questions or getting ad hoc support, ad hoc communications.
Just one quick thing to add. A lot of the tools that are out there now allow you to record short little messages and then leave it for people. I know Slack, you can record short little video messages and save that to someone's messaging queue, right? So they can kind of listen to it, watch it later. You could probably do the same thing in Teams and things like that. We at Agile Meridian, we use it all the time. At least I do, because I'm kind of a nerd and geek and try out different things on my partners. And so I do that quite a bit. I record, things that I do that I learn, and I save it for people to watch later. And so we've started to do that. There's actually a question from Ilian. Isn't asynchronous communication also a distraction for people? What do you think?
I think it can be. I think we need to manage it. Let me give you an example that I'm experiencing right now. I'm working with an organization and they have one channel for everything. And I recently made the request to split out that channel into things that were critical information that everybody needs to know and act on quickly versus things that were just a conversation. Or maybe break that out by roles.
Yeah.
Or community of practice, for example. So you can manage asynchronous communication so that it is not a distraction. And think of it this way. If you combined that with a calendar that had people actually block out time for heads down work, block out time for collaboration, block out time for meetings, then it's going to be a lot easier to manage.
Yeah, that's true. So when you're blocked off for heads down work, you're actually blocked off. You have all the your notifications turned off, so you're not distracted, right? So you don't get pulled into conversations because that's your time. That's your time to do the work. A good question, though.
It is a great question. So this is the meeting canvas that Kumar came up with, I believe. And the thing about this is that this is an incredible way to design your meetings if you're the facilitator. It really asks all the questions you need to ask. For example, why? The purpose. What are we looking to achieve? Are we having this meeting in the first place? And are we trying to make decisions? Are we brainstorming? Are we looking for alignment? Is this planning? What are the implications if we don't achieve that purpose? Then we look at who. And this is what I'm asking people to really look at. In fact, talk to your business sponsor. Talk to your leader. You want to make sure that meetings aren't forwarded and forwarded and forwarded. You also want to get buy-in from leadership on just inviting the people that are decision makers, that are going to be adding like their subject matter experts, or that are going to be responsible for whatever is decided moving forward. So being very careful about who we invite.
Mhm.
Inputs. So I love to have objective analysis in front of a meeting, especially if we're talking about current state in any form. And that could be at the team level in a retrospective. Here's our cycle time. Here's where we had blockers. This is how much time certain things took. This is the quality that we have. Or whether it's planning for developing a roadmap across a leadership team. What do we know about net promoter scores? What do we know about customer sentiment? And how does that inform us on moving forward? Finally, when you've got that side of what we call a sandwich completed, then we look at the right side, which is, what are the outcomes? Do we want a decision made about what? Will there be deliverables out of this, like a roadmap? Success factors here relate to, what are the critical success factors for success? What must be present to ensure that we're facilitating a meeting that has the impact we want it to have? And then pitfalls. This could be anything from, this is a brand new way of working, and so we need to coach leadership to understand, and other people in different roles to understand what the role is. Or maybe it's interpersonal relationship issues. And we know that Sam and John are going to get into this conversation and they're going to have a fight. They're going to end up in an endless debate. So we want to get with them and look at how can we manage conflict in advance. Once we have the sandwich, the outer sides of the sandwich complete, it becomes a lot easier to create and craft the agenda that's going to have the most impact. And then finally, once we have that, what environment, what tools, what techniques will we use? And some of them, one of my favorite techniques that we teach with the Art of Facilitation course is the power start, because it aligns people up front to what their roles are, what the purpose of the meeting is, and what the outcome is, so that everybody's on the same page. Is there anything you want to add, Kumar?
No, I just think, I was just thinking as you were talking about the sandwich, that I should turn this canvas this way. So you have the top slice, you got the bottom slice, and then you got the meat in the middle. So it looks more like a sandwich. So that's where my mind was going. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
I will say this though, a lot of times in our class, when we talk about the tools and techniques, what we're really talking about there is the facilitation tools and techniques. How will you, if you're facilitating a meeting, how will you engage your participants? How will you make sure that they're invested in the outcome of the meeting? How will you ensure that they are participating not only with you as a facilitator, but with each other in collaboration to create the outcome that you want? And so that's where you can sort of put your creative hat on and think about all the things that you might do to ensure that the meeting is successful, right? That you get to the outcomes that you want, that people should come to a meeting excited by what you are going to accomplish together in that session. And I don't know how often that happens. It's very rare that it happens, but wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where you're excited to go to a meeting because you know something great is going to happen at the end of it. You're going to collaborate with your peers to create something awesome, right? But too often that's not the case, right? Too often we dread going to meetings because we don't prepare enough. We dread going to meetings. Well, there's no agenda. We dread going to meetings. Well, why are we here? I'm multitasking. I got 3 other things that I have to do. And so, what this little template will give you, and you're going to get this, by the way, tomorrow in an ebook. So just watch your emails. We'll drop that in tomorrow. This, and along with some other guidance, What would be awesome is if we all took responsibility for our meetings that we are in and did our own inventory, right? So that we can sort of change the culture one meeting at a time.
So some of the techniques I like to use are breakout sessions. People like to be part of the process. And if you give them an opportunity to communicate with each other and then come back with their ideas, you often have a richer set of solutions available. Miro boards. So if we're working with remote workers, we want to get everyone to collectively brainstorm. We can do things like the silent grouping that we talk about in the Art of Facilitation course, where people take a few minutes and answer a question or brainstorm on a problem or identify what the problem is. And then we lead that into voting and then coming up with a solution. So we can design meetings so that they're very interactive and that we know we're going to hear from different people, not just the loudest voice in the room. So this is kind of the antithesis of what I call the talking head syndrome. And when we have employees that are remote, it's important to maintain engagement and connection. So actually, tools and techniques can be a brilliant way to engage people, to have them be active, to have them connect with each other and with whatever problem or solution you're coming up with. So we talked about asynchronous communication strategies and approaches. We talked about inventory and assessing our meetings, like holistically taking a step back. We talked about making sure that everyone's calendars are balanced with time spent heads down or collaborating and meeting and breaks. And we also talked about the meeting canvas and how you can properly design meetings so that you get the outcomes that you're looking for. So we'd like you to identify, was there anything in this webinar that you're excited to go back and experiment with in your own organization? I'm going to go ahead and we'd love to hear from you.
Tracy Fortune says, "Power start." So we got to make sure we include that in the ebook that we send out tomorrow.
Got it.
So we'll include what it is and how you run it. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, the other thing I think about is the agreement, the meeting agreement at the front of the meeting. Now, the only problem with that is that if you're going to put psychological safety in that agreement, you've got to make sure everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
So that may be something to coach people on before you walk into a room.
Right. Eliane, I just realized you could do this on this platform. You can actually show people's comments. Blocking time and agenda. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to assume I know what you mean. So maybe you can elaborate, Eliane. What do you mean by that? Blocking time on the agenda. Here's Tracy's power start. Do you mean just making sure you have enough time in the agenda to do the things you need to do? And while we wait for that answer, any other takeaways? You can either use Menti to put them in, or you can just put it in the YouTube chat, and we can do it that way. One thing, innovate, etc. Okay, yeah, exactly. I understand. So Eliane, so blocking time on the agenda to make sure people have time to innovate, to collaborate, to share. yeah, I think that's really important, right? To have that time in there. I totally agree. Yeah, one thing that we didn't mention in our talk, but I think it's important to include on the canvas when you plan for meetings. It's important to include time to build psychological safety, right? So that you get with the Power Start, you get that with team agreements, things like that. Um, but it's really important and critical as a facilitator or a participant that you are engaged, and the only way you can engage is if you feel safe to engage. And so in this disconnected world we live in, it's even more important to spend the time to get to know the participants in the room. One of the things that I often do is some kind of a check-in activity in the beginning of meetings. And there's actually a really nice website called Check-in, TSCH. I forget the spelling. I'll put it in the notes here once, in the chat once I remember it. But it's Check-in with a T, so TCHECKA.IN. And all that does in a remote meeting is it just pops up a question in the beginning of the meeting for everyone to sort of check into the meeting by checking out of whatever they're thinking about. So some open-ended question that it randomly comes up with to ask about people and what they're thinking or feeling at that time. And what that does is just by sharing something about themselves, you're almost creating a culture where people are okay to be vulnerable, to share, what they're feeling at that moment in time. And when people are more vulnerable, they're also more open, they're more curious, and maybe they'll be more engaged in your meeting.
Well, that's why we use icebreakers, right?
Yes.
So we have TS check-in, which I think is a separate tool. But there's a number of icebreakers that are available that we can share with you. We'll put that in the e-brochure for some ideas. And icebreakers do the same thing. They kind of make things less significant. They make things so that people can open up and share because it isn't so heavy. And people get a chance to know each other before we just jump into a conversation. It's good to do periodically, even with people that are working together. I have a story about psychological safety. I was in an organization, and an enterprise agile coach decided we were going through a planning session. Leadership and teams, 20 teams, were in one room. And we had a couple of days, 2 days, to plan 3 months in advance for what work was going to be done. The teams came up to the front of the room and shared their ideas and their plan. At this point, the VP dressed down one of those teams.
Mm.
And the reason I know that is because as they shuffled out, they let me know. They put their concerns and their questions and how it occurred for them on a little sticky. And I actually went to the VP, even though I was new to the organization, to let him know about the impact. And I said, look, the impact was not only on that team, it was on all of the other teams. The 20 teams that were there got the same message. And remember, at the beginning of this session, we talked about psychological safety.
Mm.
Well, the great thing was he turned that around. He immediately went back to the room. He told the teams that he apologized, that leadership had not been accountable for things that they could do and influence, and asked for partnership, which changed the whole way that 20 different teams were going to exit that meeting and go into the next 3 months. So psychological safety, let's underscore that. That's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've put in a message in the YouTube chat for any questions or any feedback that you'd like to share. I know we've lost a few people towards the end of the hour. I'm sure you're all getting ready for your next meeting. But we really appreciate all of you coming. Please put your questions in the chat. And oh yeah, our next class, Art of Facilitation, where you get to learn a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we go over the facilitator stance. active listening, and you're actually working with a very talented cohort in breakout rooms, interactively, co-creating and using all of the facilitation tools and techniques, even beyond, well beyond what we've covered in the webinar today. So
Yeah.
we hope to see people on June 18th and 19th, and I've invited another Enterprise Agile coach, Rich Stewart, my husband, to join me on this training. We always have a lot of fun. People say that in our workshops, they really enjoy it. There's a good bit of banter, fun banter that goes along with it. So we hope to see you there.
It is a weekend class, so it won't conflict with work. Of course, it kind of violates one of the principles we talked about, time off. But we thought we would try it just to see if, for those of you who are so busy during the week and still want to learn, we try to make the class as fun and engaging as possible. So even though you're spending a weekend in a training, it shouldn't feel that way. All right. Well, there's no questions. Do you have any questions, Paula?
Yeah. So for anyone who's still hanging in there with us, first of all, I want to thank you for your participation. I'm very clear that your participation makes these webinars and our training much richer. And yeah, we'd just like to know, did you get any value from this webinar?
Yeah, I forgot the slide was here. I asked people to put it in chat, but yeah, if you are still here, there's a few of you still here, so I'd love to get your feedback. And you can put it either in Menti or you can put it in YouTube. That would be fine. Awesome.
Thank you. And look, we're looking forward to sending out this video recording as well as an ebook that goes into more details on some of the subjects that we touched on today. We hope that you have a wonderful, productive rest of your week.
Yes, and also, if you would also, think about what was missing in this webinar that you thought you were going to get. That would be great too. If you take the time just to put in the chat, that would be awesome. So we can improve them. Oh, and a shameless plug. Next Wednesday, we have part 2 of our product journey webinar. So for those of you that attended part 1, part 2 is coming. If you haven't signed up, just look for the link on LinkedIn and sign up for that. And we hope to see you next Wednesday for that. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right. See everyone.
Take care.
Week.
Bye, Kumar. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye, Paula.
Bye.